Welcome to the Titans of Industry show. Today I'm with my good friend David Quintieri, and David is the author of The Money GPS and best known for this book. Great book. Been interviewed by various programs. He's been, like me, he's been interviewed by USA Watchdog, True News, Gold Money, Kerry Lutz at Financial Survivor Network. Been all over the place. Mostly. David is famous for pounding the derivatives and the fact that there's 1.5 quadrillion, maybe even more at this point, 25 times the world's debt, and it's pretty unique. And I'm glad David is here with us. So thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me on.
Hey, you know what? I'd like to throw something at you that has been covered in the news just today. And it's just that the Congress is taking a holiday, and when they come back, they have so much to vote on and to figure out that Trump said today, maybe the government just needs one good shutdown, one healthy shutdown. I mean, you gotta love that guy. What do you think will happen when they resume? Can they decide on the tax reform? Can they decide on the wall? Tell me your thoughts on this.
They had so much time to decide on all of this prior to this little shutdown, and I don't think anything will be resolved afterwards. If they get anything resolved, it's not going to be what they set out to do in the first place. So if they were to somehow figure out the debt ceiling that's always coming its way, they end up at the very last second. Sometimes they do get that in, but ultimately it's not what was hoped for in the first place. Both sides end up losing, and ultimately the people lose out the most. There is so much that goes on within the Congress, and most of it is a fraud. When you look at some of these things that they have to sign and you realize, okay, there are 1,000 pages and they're told you have to sign it within the next few hours. They can't possibly read it, and they're signing bills and there's no possible way. And of course, this always happens like this. They don't want to decide. They start fighting in between each other, and then at the very last second, they're forced to sign it, and who knows what they're actually approving.
Interesting. You know what? And obviously, I completely agree with you, because we've seen it many times done, including the world's most important law for the last 100 years, the Federal Reserve Act, which is they snuck in there at what was it, like a Christmas holiday, and when everyone came back, boom, you got a central bank in America, right? You remember that?
Exactly, and they've been doing the similar tactics ever since.
Sure. Hey, I wanna ask you about a huge shift that's going on right now in the gold sector. So, the World Gold Council, they say that the global gold scrap supply declined significantly during the first half of 2017, even though the price of gold has increased. So they plunged to 563 metric tons in the first half of 2017 compared to 702 metric tons during that same period last year. This is like a huge shift, because think about the price is rising and the scrap is declining. Is this as close to the bottom for the gold sector as it gets, or what do you think will trigger the gold market to become even more exciting? Because right now gold is increasing, but gold shares are definitely not having a burst moment like they had in 2016.
I look at it a lot different than most people. I am definitely bullish on gold, but not on the price of gold. I never really try to look at that, because ultimately they can manipulate this as far as the eye can see. I personally believe that they will do everything in their power to manipulate and keep gold within this trading range. That's not saying it can't go higher or it can't go lower. I just think that they are doing so well at manipulating, and they want to continue that for the foreseeable future. Now, saying that, I'd look at gold, and that goes for silver as well. But when I want gold, I want to hold it and then use that to pass wealth on generation to generation. I don't necessarily care what the price is because the physical metal is worth more today than it ever has been. Doesn't matter about the price if it hit 1900 before. I look at it as this is more valuable today because there's more people trying to buy the physical metals. But when we talk about the price you see, that's the exchange price. That's paper gold. That's not real gold. So I look at it a different way, and I think that, that's I'll say about that.
So, let's talk about the S&P 500 for a bit. Wealth Research Group, we laid out a script. We laid out what we think will happen in the next 3 or 4 quarters, and we called it the blow off top. And basically, nothing that has to do with fundamentals or valuations. We believe that the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and the Dow are going much higher because of just investor emotions, the way that the market is built. The latecomers that want to come in when it's safe after it's been already 8.5 years of gains pocketed, and they'll come in there now. And personally, I see a 50% rise in the Dow Jones from now. It can definitely go up to about 33,000 points. Valuations are insanely high. If you're talking about the S&P 500, its 12-month PE ratio is as high as it ever was. If you're talking about net margin debt for the S&P 500 companies, that's insanely high. It's like most companies are on most investors are on margin, and then you look at the PE ratios; they're approaching 30. That is, 30 is what you would pay for a company like Disney. That's not what you pay for 500 companies, some of them mediocre. Where are we in this bull market? And how do you see it playing out from now on?
Well, you've made some very good points here. And what I would like to say is that the stock market could rise even further from this point. I don't deny that. I think that this is something that shows you the power of central banks and how well they are able to keep a fraud alive. It's really surprised me. So central banks have been engaging in a policy that has directly manipulated the price of stocks, and they do so, like the Swiss National Bank, publicly. You can see their 13F filings with the SEC, and you'll see how much of the different companies they own, how many shares they own, the rate at which they're increasing their purchases, and they are buying the actual equities because just like any other corporation, they need to produce a profit, and they do so. They print up money and they buy the shares. Then you also have the share buybacks, which are happening. That's pushing the stocks up as well. And then you have an instance like looking at Japan, for example, where they're just buying everything. The actual real investment within Japan is so minuscule compared to what the central bank does. And you know that the power of these central banks is apparent with this. Now, of course, that devalues the currency to such a great degree, and over the long term that is very, very dangerous, but that's the policy that they've gone with. So in the short term, medium term, I could see the stocks continue to go higher, but you need to pay attention to, is it the market that's going higher, or is it select stocks that have gone higher? And I believe it is only a few select stocks, a handful of stocks that have been pushed higher, that have taken this whole market to the next level. Most people don't want to look at that because they simply are invested probably in the right stocks, and they think that everything is just fine and everything is awesome, but that isn't the case. And ultimately, when the dominoes fall, you can't stop it.
Sure. Well, we all know that the S&P 500, if you take away those, if you take away Netflix and Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and Google, it's only 7.5% instead of 10.5%. So those 5-6 companies they've made the gains 133%. I'm sorry, 33% higher than the rest of the components. I want to talk to you about deflation. inflation is is a non-issue for for many of the European states. In the U.S., whether or not you believe in the government statistics, I personally don't. But there's still the inflation is very tamed, to say the least. Even if you look at some shadow stats, it's not high. And if you look at bank credits, they're plummeting. So banks are not making new loans. Leases are down. Commercial loans for real estate are down. Loans for autos are down. Consumer loans are plummeting. So are we seeing deflation in in the States, in the United States right now? Because if you look at auto inventory and auto sales, they're going down. Existing home sales are flattening. It all looks like it's boiling down right now and coming down to a scratching halt.
It depends on what you look at. Because if you look at people's wages, yes, there's a deflation. If you look at the stock market, however, you can say that there's inflation. So it all depends. Ultimately, the people's pocketbooks, they're seeing deflation. They're not gaining on that. That's unfortunate. And like you pointed out, all those different statistics that are really showing a deflationary environment. And I do agree. I think that we will see a very serious deflation that occurs. And this could all be accelerated by an increase in interest rates because the market can't handle it. I mean, it's barely surviving as it is. And the interest rates have been at historic lows for quite a long time. If they increase interest rates, this whole economy, whatever's left of it, will be ruined. And that's just a fact. It can't be supported even at a 0% interest rate, never mind if they were to bring them up a few percent. Look at around the world where we have negative interest rates even, and the economies are just struggling to move. This doesn't work. Ultimately, the central bank policies of printing money, lowering interest rates, it doesn't work, but they'll try it anyway. As a result, we're going to see a deflation, a major deflation, in fact. And then I agree with Mike Maloney when he talks about the central banks will respond accordingly and they will hyperinflate their currencies, at least major inflation, if not hyperinflations, depending on which country.
Now, let's talk about the Fed real quick and some potential rate hikes. Do you think the dollar, the index, is falling severely because they overpromised rate hikes and now they're not delivering? Or do you think the dollar is falling due to other factors? Maybe it's the political factor. I mean, just thinking out loud with you here, Trump has made so many promises. It looks like they're not going to come true. We're approaching, in 3 months, we're going to approach 1 year to his presidency. Nothing major has been done. In fact, there have been a lot of failures. Do you think that the dollar bull market is over and we're officially entering the spirit of bear market in the dollar?
I think there's a lot of factors that play into it. I personally think that it went too high in the first place. So now it's trying to find itself at a more realistic level. There's no reason for it to have gone so high, but it ultimately is one currency versus another. And that's the way you need to look at it. When you see the US dollar, base that against the euro, well, the euro is doing terrible as well. So is the US dollar more valuable? Well, maybe, that depends on the foreign exchange markets and what they decide. I think they're all terrible. And so it's a matter of which one is the least terrible. And that's where the investment was going. That was pushing it higher. And then a lot of people had this sort of euphoria about Trump and how day one he was going to be able to implement everything that he said. The border wall would be built within the first 100 days and made a lot of promises basically. And ultimately, the way that the government works is that it needs a very, very long time to get a very little bit of action to actually take place. So I think it's a big bunch of failures, one after the other. But what I would see with what's happening with the dollar is it's always an external factor that, well, not always, but it's, you tend to see external factors as well. Remember that there's currency wars, which are always taking place, which can move these up and down at their will. It's not just the U.S. that has all the power to do everything. Other countries can affect these fluctuations, can create fluctuations as well. So there's many factors at play here.
Now, you're in Canada, but then again, you speak to a lot of American subscribers. What is your personal opinion of legalizing marijuana for cannabis, for recreational and medicinal uses?
I think that it is beneficial because of the ability for the government to make money off of it. I also think that it is beneficial that you will take a lot of that money that's being made off of the drugs and, at least put it into the hands of the government versus individuals who are able to profit from this. I think it should be done in a different way. I mean, I don't think that the substance should be regulated in the way that it is. I think that you're basically putting all of your trust into the government. I think that's better than what we have now. So at least I'll say that it is beneficial. You're going to be able to create new jobs. You're going to have a lot of regulations around it, and that's good and bad. But ultimately, I think for the economy, it's good, and I'm then definitely thinking that it's a positive thing.
Well, obviously, those jobs will not get outsourced, so that's another layer of importance here. And the other thing to consider, in my opinion, is the fact that this market already exists. It's not like you're trying to build a new market. It's an illicit market, an illegal market. You're simply going to move it into the legal side, which is preferable always, right? To have something legal than illegal. That way you can have more quality control, etc. on this, and not have crime over a plant, which is ridiculous, right?
I agree.
I want to talk to you about an important chart, which is called the Energy Index as percentage of total S&P 500. And I'll put this chart on the screen as we do this interview. What we see in this chart is that 1999 until 2004, you've seen the energy component of the S&P 500 at a low. It's 6% of the S&P 500. That's like the lowest low. And in 2008, it was it was over 16%. So that's 250% higher. Now it's back to that lowest level, that bottom 6%. So it looks like the energy component of the S&P 500, people are just ignoring oil companies, ignoring natural gas companies, ignoring anything that has to do with real assets, and they're sticking to tech companies. And when we see this shift, with this change, we want to be ahead of the curve, right? We want to be ahead of this. How do you see the price of oil playing into inflation? Because obviously oil is a major part of inflation. If oil prices begin to rise, that means inflation rises, that means precious metals rise. That plays into the entire real asset theme. But do you think oil has bottomed, or do you think it's, many people say, including a guy that you like to quote, Mike Maloney, he says that oil might reach $10 a barrel. So what's your opinion on this?
I agree with him in that respect. I mean, the price can go anywhere, but it's looking at how it came down from over $100 a barrel to approximately $30 a barrel in such a short period of time. And they said that there were, so much of a glut. There was too much inventory out of nowhere. They just came out and said there's too much inventory. The price dropped so dramatically in such a short period of time. And I don't believe that for a second. I don't know why they're doing this. I know that those in behind the scenes have manipulated the price downward. Maybe they had initially pushed it up in the first place. But the fact that because of this inventory which just came online all of a sudden, and it was a glut, and the price had to drop so drastically in that period of time. There's no way. It doesn't happen, not with any commodity, and especially not with oil. So something fishy is going on here. Now, where is it headed? It's been within this range for quite a long time now, and it just seems like something has to give. Why isn't the ability for, all these companies that are digging, they're bringing up the oil. What is exactly is going on? Are they unable to find new oil? Are there no new reserves? Why is the price staying stagnant for such a long period of time? To me, it doesn't really make any sense. I think something else is going on here. I don't know what they're pushing for. My initial thoughts on this was, when they brought the price down, was that they wanted to hurt Russia. And that was part of it anyway, and other countries like Venezuela. They do so even though a country like Saudi Arabia gets hurt by this. The US has so much funding going into Saudi Arabia that I think they can work out a deal behind the scenes. You also see Saudi Arabia trying to diversify. I don't know if that's going to work at all, but I think that this could be sort of a weapon against a country like Russia and like Venezuela. That's my thought on it. I did cover that before, but of course there hasn't been too much intel on that. So that's my thought anyway.
Interesting. David, lastly, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the cryptocurrency world. The SEC just approved a option exchange for Bitcoin. That's I'm hearing just in the last 3 days, 40 hedge funds have raised money to start investing in Bitcoin. The price is obviously up. What is the future of this cryptocurrency in particular?
Well, I just want to start by saying that we have hundreds and hundreds of cryptocurrencies, and I believe that hundreds of them will not exist in the future. So there's going to be a few that really stand out. So to talk about Bitcoin here, I do think that is the strongest at this time. I mean, it's been around for a while. It's proved itself. You can see that businesses have taken it up and are trying to use it as for different transaction mediums. You see the debit cards that are out there. You can see, all of this infrastructure that's being built around Bitcoin. It's serious. It's not like something that was just created as just an idea and, maybe it's good in the future, but at this time it's really nothing. I think a lot of what's happening is they're trying to find the next Bitcoin, and that's what all this chasing is about. But at the same time, Bitcoin is very mature, and like I said, there's a lot of businesses around it. The price here is very volatile. There's no telling where the price will be tomorrow. I don't know. I think that it could definitely go higher, and it should go higher, but at the same time, you have a lot of competing currencies which could take its market share away. That hasn't happened recently, but the market, as I said, it's because it's so small in comparison to the bond market, the stock market, and everything else. It moves up and down dramatically. So if you're holding on to Bitcoin or you're thinking about Bitcoin, you have to be ready for huge swings every single day. The market moves quite wildly. If you're going to get into Bitcoin, I think that you need to understand not to keep your money with the exchanges. And that goes for stocks as well. When people think that keeping your money in your accounts, you're sheltered and you're okay. That's your money. Well, look at what happened with MF Global. Segregated accounts were taken from people. Never trust anybody. And that goes for cryptocurrencies as well. So with Bitcoin, you want to hold on to your own private keys. You can use a hardware wallet. You can use a paper wallet. It gives us that advantage above stocks and everything else, where you're basically giving your money away and you hope that one day you can pull it back. So cryptocurrencies have the advantage that at least you can hold on to your own private keys. You keep that on your own. You can put it in your head even and just memorize that number, and you would have that for yourself. So I think that is something really good. I think it's important. I think the security around it has improved, and people are aware of the problems that could exist, and people are getting more wise not to keep their money on the exchanges. That's where the real problems are with Bitcoin with cryptocurrencies are on the exchanges. You can see that the governments are trying to just attack the exchanges, and if you have your money with those exchanges, you take the risk. So don't do that. And I think that in terms of price here, we could see a much bigger gain in many currencies. And then I think that over time, a longer term scenario, we'll see money sort of finding its way into the stronger ones, and they'll prove themselves over time.
Well, David, thank you very much for taking the time there. It's been an amazing interview. Why don't you tell folks where they can find your work, because I know I'm a great fan as well.
Absolutely. So you can go to YouTube, just look for The Money GPS. You can check all of my work out there. I have also my website, themoneygps.com, where I've got a free e-course for people to check out. I got free ebooks, lots of stuff there too, themoneygps.com.
Excellent. David Quintieri, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on.